Welcome to Using Your Power. I am David Andrew Wiebe, and joining me is
Maveen, Kaura.
How you doing, Maveen?
I'm good, man. I've just been drinking on this energy drink that you just gave me, so I'm excited.
Tasty, right?
That's pretty good, actually. Sugar-free.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about building a network.
Right.
Just right.
No, it's. I think it's actually a pretty exciting subject when it comes right down to it. And, building a network is something that's often talked about. And I think there's actually a lot of cynicism about it because of this, where you go to these networking events, you shake hands, you give away business cards, and then that's it. Where, somebody who's really prepared, knows what they want to share, knows what they want to say, or even just a really well-organized networking event can benefit you in so many ways and propel you forward in your life or in your business or whatever it is that you're doing. So I think we're definitely examining it from that positive perspective of why you'd want to build a network, why we think it's important, and the ways in which it can benefit you. But yeah, just acknowledging that there's probably a lot of cynicism and negativity out there about it too.
Absolutely. And, before we get into that, I think we should make a quick mention of that this is our 10th episode that we're going to be recording together. And we've definitely gone through some ups and we've definitely been learning quite a bit. And, just kind of our own dynamic of working together. And so, what are your thoughts on the first 10 episodes before we get into this one?
Well, I think we're developing our chemistry over time. I think we're flowing better. We're, figuring out where maybe our weaknesses are, or where areas where we could improve and be better as podcasters. And really, it's been figuring out your chemistry and my chemistry and how we interact together, because podcasting is something I've been doing since 2009. And throughout that process, I felt like I got better and better, and I was able to express myself better over time. But it's always still a new thing or a new dynamic when you introduce somebody else completely. So that's kind of where we're at. But it gets better with each episode, I think.
No, I agree. It's different when you do it yourself, right? When you're podcasting yourself, you're just kind of responsible for talking about, to the audience for yourself, not really talking with anybody else and interacting, right? But when you have that two-person dynamic, one thing I've noticed is really, when to kind of put, come on into the conversation and when not to come into the conversation. Sometimes I feel like just jumping in right away and making a point, but just kind of really understanding how that dynamic works, so I'm not cutting you off and vice versa, right? So it's been a great learning experience for me as well.
Absolutely. I've worked with other hosts and co-hosts too, and again, that would be a completely different dynamic. But I guess if you know the person for some amount of time, then there's that comfort level. And so there was a little bit of that between you and I as well. We hung out in coffee shops and had a lot of chats too. So
for sure, and we've gone out and like we said earlier, we've gone out for little hikes and gone off to Banff and stuff like that. So we've definitely got to know each other as we've just kind of grown the friendship here and also growing this podcast into our little business here right now.
Exactly. So that's pretty exciting. So yeah, we're talking about building a network. I wanted to share a little bit about personal connection because I think that's where it all starts. It's not just about going to networking events or going to corporate mandated events where you're forced to speak to other people or pressured into making some kind of sale at that event. It's more so who are your friends? Who are their friends? Who's your family members? And what's the potential for, we often talk about 6 degrees of separation. Well, what's the potential for 1 or 2 degrees of separation of people that you could know that would be influential in your life or in your business, or people that could help you take things to the next level? So first and foremost, I think it begins with those personal connections. Who could you introduce to another people is one way to think about how you could add value to others. Okay, so you have a friend who's a photographer and you have a friend who's a graphic designer, and neither of them see, they don't have complementary strengths, but photography and graphic design would be complementary. So bringing those two people together to work with each other could potentially be beneficial for both of them and might open up new business opportunities for them. So that's one way you can add value to others. And I think that's really the goal of networking, is adding value to others, but adding value to yourself simultaneously.
You know, you're right, David. One of the things that you made me think of was, you know, when you're introducing people, is really just getting good at introducing people that don't know each other. And then the people who are being introduced hopefully have the confidence enough to talk to each other about, you know, what they do on a personal level and what they maybe do as a work level as well, right? And just kind of helping them become friends. I always look at networking as a way just to make new friends.
And you really just don't know. You never know who is going to be a future client, a future friend, maybe even a significant other down the line. And I believe in making a good impression. It's obvious watching other people, how they conduct themselves, that they don't see that as being a major priority.
Right.
They don't need, or, you know, maybe arrogance is the impression they want to make on others. So it's a very deliberate thing too. It could be that. I don't necessarily see the benefit in that long term, mind you. I think everybody is starved for a friend. It's just that they're hurting and they're not necessarily willing to push through that pain to make another connection. So I relate to that. I totally understand that though, but it's a hard thing to work through. So with building a network, personal connections can really open up a huge number of opportunities. What do you think?
No, I agree. You know, the one cool thing that we have right now is our social media, right? I mean, there's 400 or 500. Some people have 1,000 Facebook friends. If you actually communicate with all these friends of yours, you would really be able to see that there are people who are in different genres of maybe music or in different hobbies that people have, that you're able to maybe connect with these guys or girls and really just see how you can bring that into what you're doing as well, right? I mean, everybody has a different talent, and if you can open up the network you have, sometimes you don't even have to go outside of that network, right? Obviously, I would never recommend only staying within your network. I think it is important to go outside of your own personal network and meet people you don't know, kind of like how I met you, right? I mean, we met at a show home. You came into where I worked, we started chatting, and you said you podcasted, you had your own home-based business, so it's kind of neat, right? It's something that I wanted to always learn about and get into. If I had said, oh no man, I'm only dealing with my 400, 500, 600 people that I have on my network, and that's it, I'm never making any new friends, this would have never been happening right now.
Yeah, I think, that's part of just letting people surprise you. So you never know what relationships or what friends will surprise you in the future and come to you with opportunities. And I've had that so many times where, maybe it's not the best way of approaching people, but I've had friends say things like, hey, are you looking to make some extra cash right now? Like, who isn't? But but those have sometimes turned into really good things, because I know, it might be another musician and they might be booking some great gigs and they just want me to come and play, which is, why wouldn't I want to do that? That's cool. I gained some experience. I got paid for the gig and we have a good time. And then it's actually worth my time as well. So sometimes it just presents itself in very simple ways like that, like very unexpected. So that's why I believe in being, presentable or nice to everybody. I think it was Joyce Meyer that said, though, like 25% of people like you, 25% people could be convinced to like you, 25% of people hate you, and then 25% of people could be convinced to hate you. So you're never going to appeal to everybody, but still making a good first impression where you can I think is important.
Well, they say you can't make a first impression twice, so
no.
I do agree with that, right? So kind of what you're saying too, right? It's finding the right people to team up with. That was kind of my point I had. So one, being in your own personal network that you have already built. I mean, we've all potentially have gone to school and moved on to higher different educations as well. Worked different jobs and did different projects, right? So we've had the ability to meet people and connect with different people from different groups, right? And now when you're looking to have potentially, let's say, your own business, it is finding the right people. I mean, it's easy to build a network with 400 or 500 people, and but you have to really know which of those 400 or 500 people that you need to connect with based on the projects you're working on, right? And even if there's 5 or 10 people that have that same skill, you need to still find that 1 or 2 people that actually work better for you as well, right? I mean, you can have 10 people, but you got to find the people that don't have all the same skills you have. I do think it is important to find people within your own network that don't have all the same skills, right? I remember hearing a line, you probably heard this too, David, that if everybody in your network had the same skills as you, one of you is not needed in your network, right? Or So it made me think, right? It's true. Like if me and you had the exact same skills podcasting, well, one of us is really not needed, right?
Yeah, in a way.
The nice thing is you bring different technical skills. I bring different skills as well, different experiences we both bring. So, just connecting with the right people does make a big difference.
Well, and it's true in bands as well, because if without the right chemistry, that band won't really last over the long haul. There might be little perks, there might be financial incentives for staying, so that might keep you for a little bit longer. There might be other little incentives along the way, whether it's appealing to the other sex or maybe just free drinks at the pub. Depending on what your motivation is, there might be other incentives for staying in that band. But one that sticks together is one where there's a mutual respect for each other, and that the relationship is solid. It really is a lot like a marriage, and so you'll have ups and downs, and it won't always be easy. But whether it's a business or a band, it's a very similar situation where it won't have staying power without a solid foundation.
Right. And, just to kind of add to that too, part of having a solid foundation is really having a goal. And once you understand your goal and each step in that goal, then you can really build the right network to help you achieve that goal. Because obviously it's not just your goal that the network is helping you achieve. The people you connect with also are probably trying to achieve their own goals as well, right? So, once you have that goal step by step, that people in that network can change, and the goals can change as well, right? It's not necessarily that the first person you team up with is always going to be the right person to team up with, right?
Yeah.
Those are going to change as you continue to grow, and as they're going to add the value where they needed to add value, and they may even potentially introduce you to somebody else that can do what you're looking for better than they can, right? So it's always good to keep your mind open as well to what's available.
Yeah. And I think some people are really great at networking, and other people aren't necessarily equipped for that, and may never be. That's their strength. No matter how hard they work at it, they can improve from where they are, but they can't necessarily make it their number one thing. So I think it's important to realize for everyone out there that there are people who are really strong networkers and are really good at that. And I think the temptation sometimes is to look at them and go, "Oh, I wonder why I'm not that." Like, you can be really down on yourself. Whereas I think it's just important to recognize, like, you have your strength. And that's part of what you said about goals, is if you have your bigger vision of what your goal is, then you can find ways to fit everything into that goal. Whereas if you have no overarching goal, that could be pretty murky and hard to figure out.
No, you're right. And, the other part of it too is not everybody is confident to network either, right? So sometimes it is hard to connect to the right people if you're not confident on your ability to connect, right? I know as I was growing up, I was a pretty shy kid growing up, right? And now I've kind of got over that shyness. I'm able to talk to a lot of different people,
Sure.
And it doesn't matter who you are, if you're a CEO or if you're not a CEO, it doesn't really matter to me, right? I don't look at your position anymore. I look at the way, just finding ways to connect to you. And if you find that value in me, and if I find that value in you, then we as two people can work together, right? I don't look at your status anymore.
I'd like to connect that to the next point, which is just being human. So often in networking, again, with the example I gave earlier of a network meeting that you're forced into or you choose to go to, and then you figure out that it's really disorganized and it's hard to make that connection with others unless you're super outgoing, is no matter what, I think being yourself. I know it's trite advice. I know it's sometimes hard to figure out who you are in the context of different situations, but admitting your mistakes or admitting your difficulties, you'll find that people warm to you much quicker if you say, like, I'm just kind of nervous, and then they'll go, oh yeah, me too, and they don't look nervous, but really, like, they might be just as nervous as you are, and you'll be grateful that you struck out that conversation, and they will be too. They'll be thankful that you took the time to talk to them. So I think being human, admitting to mistakes, admitting to difficulties, admitting to your highs as well as your lows, makes you immediately relatable. And really, what's the point of networking if people can't relate to you?
No, you're right. I think the biggest thing people are looking for is someone who is genuine, right? So I think that's kind of what you're saying by being human, is really just be genuine, be yourself, be who you are, projecting yourself to be, and don't be somebody who you're not trying to be, I guess. I think the best I can can say is, I've also tried to be something I'm not. And I've found that when I do that, I'm not successful because I'm not being true to myself, right? As soon as I said to myself, I can't be fake, because then I got to be fake all the time, right?
That's right.
So if I said, what's the point of that, right? I've tried that. It doesn't work. So now I'm just myself. I'm authentic. I speak the way I want to speak. I connect to the people that will connect with me, right? If the people, that's the two-sided coin, right? People have to want to connect to you just as much as you want to connect to them in part of networking, right? So if you find a good human to connect to, then connect to that human, right? You're not going to connect to every single person, and nor does everybody want to connect with you either.
No, like hopefully if you put your best foot forward, most people will at least respond somewhat favorably. Hopefully none of them are like super standoffish or you're going to yell at you for talking to them. But it's true. You're definitely not going to make friends with everybody no matter what. So it's not about trying to bat 1,000 in networking ever.
No.
And neither is it in business or investments. You can't bat 1,000.
No, you can try, but as long as you're trying to be, you have to be, like I said, genuine to yourself. I think you made that, that point of being human is such a point, right? More and more now, you'll see that in Western society, in culture right now, we are trying to be more relatable and more human and not so work focused as much as we were even 20 years ago, right? Where more and more people now are trying to have more of that spare time so they can go and connect to people and really make those interactions with their neighbor even nowadays, right? So
it's a cliche, but in business, there's a term that gets thrown around a lot, which is storytelling. Well, you got to tell the story of the brand or the story of the company so that people latch on to different things. I'm reading Onward by, I think it's Howard Schultz of Starbucks.
Okay.
It's a great book. And he's talking about this very thing. It's like, it's not just thinking about what your company's values are. It's also about how is it going to be communicated? Because sometimes getting a third party person to communicate your story lends more credibility to it than you communicating what your company is about, because you could say whatever you want about your company.
No, it's true. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that to me is a really key point about, storytelling. Again, it's cliche. It's kind of overused term, but it's nevertheless true. You want a way to communicate who you are and demonstrate that through illustration, not just through like stats or figures or just like something that came out of your mouth.
You're right, David. Storytelling makes you authentic, right? And it makes you genuine. And people can connect to authentic and genuine. People have a very hard time connecting to somebody that's just throwing out numbers and stats and just trying to quote what they've read in the news or read on social media or heard their buddies say, right? But when you have a real experience and you can connect that with people, I mean, that just opens up a whole brand new way to connect to other people.
It was actually a problem with one of the movies I watched recently, which I think it was Video Game the movie. I apologize if that's wrong. It's definitely not Indie Game the movie, because that's actually a great movie. Well, okay. One of them just starts off with a whole bunch of stats about the video game industry, and you're kind of like, so what point are they making? And then they kind of go through this history of video games, but they skip so many steps to where you're like, really, they would have just done better focusing on something specific rather than trying to tell this general story about video games, which is impossible to do in like 90 to 120 minutes when you really think about it. Right.
No, you're right. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to mention too, David, here was one of the best ways to be authentic and be genuine as a human is, join clubs that you are excited to join, where people that are sharing your same interests are also going to, right? I think that kind of lines up with what you're saying as well, right? I mean, if we go to places where we're comfortable, we'll have an easier time. So even if you're a kind of an introverted person and you have a tough time connecting to people, find a place where other introverted people may go and try to connect with them, right? Everybody's got to start somewhere. Everybody's got to start at their own level of confidence, right? So wherever that is, if I was able to, I enjoy playing chess every so often. I don't play a lot, but I personally wouldn't join a chess club. I just don't have the time to kind of go do it. But if I wanted to, and if I wanted to meet like-minded people and like-minded strategic thinkers, I might consider playing chess on a more regular basis, right? Because I know to play the game, you really got to think through your problem or think through your next move, right? So those are great places to learn to network, not just to play a game, but also to kind of think about what kind of next steps you may need to take as well.
Yeah, because you could do like painting class, you could go to ballroom dancing, you could go to like a LAN party. These are all different ways of connecting with people and various levels of social. What's the best word to use here? Social awareness.
So yeah, sure, why not?
We'll go with that. Various levels of social awareness. I would say like if you're gonna go to painting class, odds are you're talking to people who are very human, but also probably very intelligent. They're thinkers. They like, the challenge as well as kind of the meditative aspect of painting. So like relating to that. So if you're that kind of person, you would love it.
Well, the nice thing is too, just on the painting thing. So even in Calgary, they have like these paint nights, right? So you're going out,
there's a lot of them actually.
Yeah, there's tons, and there's people going that have not really into painting. They're only going because it's a new experience, right? And sometimes to go to these places, it's just for the experience, right? You might just kind of do a quick network. You might say hello to everybody. See, you might be sitting next to somebody and say, hey, what do you do, whatnot. And you may not, that networking part may not go anywhere because you're not necessarily trying to network with every single person that you ever talk to, right? That's not being genuine. But if that genuineness of networking just comes naturally, I feel.
That's a really important point. And I think for people who are introverted, maybe coming prepared with a certain number of questions. You don't want to make it sound too robotic or anything. But,
for sure.
Can you set up a bit of a formula for what that looks like? In network marketing, we had form.
That's
so
right.
Family, occupation, recreation, and then M doesn't make any sense at message. But
well, message is just having a conversation. Hopefully that's been opened up now because of using talks about family and recreation and occupation, right? So
in
the message,
the context of sales, like it could be like, okay, now they might be ready to talk about coming to see my business or learning about a product or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And the message can just be anything too, right? It could be whatever you guys are interested in talking about. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sale, but absolutely in sales, that works really well, right? I mean, there's different ways and different techniques in communicating with and networking with people as well, right? Just from Dale Carnegie, that course has a totally different system in network marketing. I know I learned the same thing, right? Form as a technique on how to kind of open up communications on talking with people. But the idea you have is just write down a couple of questions just to kind of ask people. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, where are you from? What do you do? What do you enjoy doing in your spare time? Well, if you're going to a painting thing, maybe you already have the answer to that question as far as what they like to do in their spare time, but maybe they'll surprise you and give you some other things to latch on to that you can also discuss, because they might have a lot of common interests to you too, or you might find out that they have completely different interests, and that can also be an interesting vignette to explore.
For sure. And, one of the things that I thought of as soon as when you were talking here as well was one of the things people like doing is talking. So if you can ask people exploratory questions, they'll talk and they'll think you're the most amazing listener and person to talk to, right?
Like open-ended questions.
And open-ended questions. And all you're doing is really just finding out about people, right? And a lot of people are just fighting to get all that information out of them and tell somebody about their story, right? So if you can prepare and a couple of open-ended questions and ask people about them, man, they'll be your best friend.
Very true. And just to talk a little bit more about letting people surprise you. I already mentioned this concept a little bit earlier, but just to give you maybe a little bit more of an idea of how that works or why you'd want to do that. I think, again, it goes back to making a great first impression, or as good as you possibly can. And that way, you don't put a damper on potential future communication with that person. So that's kind of where it all starts. But as you go through life, like, you have friends, and friends are often for a season. They may not be around for your entire life, but they might also come in and out of your life as well. So you can never write anybody off and say, well, I'm never going to see that person again, so I'm just going to, unload on them. Well, that might not be the best thing to do in that moment. Now, granted, there's some people you might want to set boundaries with, because that's just a healthy thing to do. I've just had so many people ask me for like recording services, so like audio engineering. I've had people ask me for art commissions, which I felt was almost out of left field, but it was still a cool cool thing to do. And if people know that I do some ghostwriting, well, if they're super busy and they can't handle their own assignments, they'll come to me and say, hey, would you like to ghostwrite for me? Even though they're already kind of ghostwriting for someone else. So it gets super meta after.
But it shows what you just said, right? If you had completely burnt that bridge, you wouldn't be getting these extra side jobs, right?
Exactly.
But because you kept that network open, it doesn't mean you have to be rude to people. You just thank them for at the time, say, hey, it's great being your friend, and let's do work together down the road, right? And when those opportunities come, they'll think about you first, right? Because you're open to it. They understand, hey, your personality, you're good to work with, you're easy to work with. But if you kind of burn bridges with every single person, no one's going to want to be your friend down the road, right?
That's the problem. So if you're pursuing a business, or if you're pursuing some kind of freelancing career, that's really the last thing you want to do is like wreck your network. Because if you're already introverted, and I'll admit to being that, certainly I again, like you, Maveen, I've overcome it in some ways, but I will always get my energy from being around myself and not necessarily from others. Sometimes I get more energy from being around others. Is you don't want to really wreck most of those relationships, if at all possible, because you will have a limited number of people in your network. You'll probably have more quality people in your network because you're kind of the person that goes deeper too. But you might not have as many, and part of networking is having a big pool to draw from if possible.
Absolutely, you said it. Is it my turn or your turn for the next point?
It will be yours.
Is it my turn? Oh, man, I lost track of where we were there. Just wanted to say, so one of the other ones I wrote down here was being aware of who your followers are on your social media networks, right? It's a good idea to figure out who the people are, what they're doing right now. I know on your different social media networks, from Twitter to Facebook to Instagram to Snapchat to Facebook, what did I miss? Google Plus, or am I missing anything?
Well, I mean, there's so many out there: Snapchat, LinkedIn,
LinkedIn,
Pinterest.
Yeah, Pinterest. Those are, there's so many different networks that we can actually build, but it's really finding the right people to work with or talk to and communicate with, right? I mean, if you post a picture, like, just like I do, most of the times you're getting a bunch of random likes from, I don't even know where these likes are coming from. They're all like porno stars liking all my stuff half the time, right? And I'm posting a picture of a glass of tea.
It's true.
It's so weird. But, if you can find that one person to connect with for each picture that somebody's liking, and maybe comment on their stuff or like their stuff, but as long as they add value to what you're doing, and maybe you can add value to what they're doing, building that one person network every time you post something can be a great way. Right now, asking people what they think, or commenting back on what you think about their stuff, is also another way to kind of enhance your network as well.
Well, it's a pretty intriguing idea in an age where social media is sometimes being used as a broadcast tool. So for some people, all they ever do is post something that they recently wrote. Nothing against that. I do that too. I do use social media as a broadcasting tool. But also, some people only post things from BuzzFeed because BuzzFeed's cool and it's entertaining and it draws people in, and I guess it makes them look or feel smart for posting it and sharing it with their friends. Some people are completely self-involved. Some people are only others focused. But I think what you're talking about there too is being others focused with your social media. Why not reach out to that new follower who followed you? You never know why unless you ask.
That's right.
So
and on that, and it's exactly what I'm saying, right? You got to really go to where your followers are, right? And especially when you're looking at the social media aspect of it, right? Obviously, you're doing all the work in the back end to build your following, right? So if your following is mostly on, let's say, for example, Twitter or Facebook, then using programs like Pinterest or Snapchat may not be the best for that particular network you're building, or in that segment of the market you're building it in, right? It really comes down to knowing where your audience is, and then building your network from where your audience is.
Well, also an interesting thought. Yeah, I guess that's something we think about so often in business, right? With social media, it's like, well, we have to go where our target audience is. It doesn't make a lot of sense to waste time on social networks where we can't discover any people like the ones that we're thinking about. But you're saying that applies to networking as well, is figure out who your target is and then try to go to on social networks where those people exist.
Yeah, it's, and it kind of lines up with the same point I had before. It's just, joining the right clubs. If you go join the right club to join, maybe it doesn't have to be a club as in a party club, but it can be if that's what you're doing. That could be it as well, right? But it's just really going to where the majority of the people that you have that likeness with, or that agree with what you are doing or like what you're doing, and then building that relationship, right? It doesn't have to be necessarily a business partner. It could be a network of followers as well, not just business folks.
Right. And the movie I was talking about earlier actually is Video Games, the movie. So it's got an S in there.
Oh, okay. So you're close.
It's pretty close, which is fine. My next point was about making introductions. Actually, again, that's another thing that I referenced earlier as far as, getting two different people connected. Like you might have two people in your network, but they don't know each other, so you introduce them because it could be a mutually beneficial thing. I think we have to be, if I have anything else to say about it, I think it's that we have to be somewhat careful in introductions we make, because sometimes you could totally create enemies out of that, and sometimes no value will come of that for the people that you introduce. So you can't just be thinking about yourself. You also have to be thinking about the kind of people that they are, and then determine whether or not they're the right people to be introduced to each other. And great things can happen, but bad things can also happen.
No, you're right. And, when you're first being introduced to somebody, I think if you take the focus off of what's in it for me being introduced to this person, and you really focus on the other person, saying, what value can I bring to the person I'm just being introduced to? I'm sure, we all know, we said earlier, maybe 300, 400, 500 people. And if we can focus on, hey, this person is let's say, is a writer, right? And say, I know a guy that owns a publishing company. I can maybe introduce this guy to the publishing company and get those guys connected. And, you become that person that adds value to the people you're meeting as well. And then, and they will thank you. Not, it doesn't have to be monetary. It doesn't have to be any other way, even if they just say thank you, right? But you get to be known as that guy that can build networks and build communication between two people that are always looking, right? And sometimes the consultants that make good money are people who bring things together.
It's one of those paradoxes that's existed probably for thousands of years, which is this whole idea of giving without receiving. Now, I don't think that applies to every aspect of life, but when it comes to networking, it's true. Sometimes you don't see the immediate value in building connections, because maybe you have a financial goal, or maybe you have a certain goal that you're looking to meet that isn't that, or that could be monetary, or it could be something else, but you have a goal that you're trying to meet, and you don't know how networking is going to get you further towards that goal. It's kind of one of those paradoxes of networking. In the long haul, you'll see the results of what you do if you do it well, if you meet the right people, if you go to the right groups. Then you'll begin to see maybe they plant you with ideas you can immediately go and use towards the achievement of your goal, or they'll provide you with resources, or they'll point you to a website you didn't even know about that could totally help you get to the next stage. So those are some of the intangibles of networking.
No, you're right. And, part of that as well is just, letting the universe introduce you to people as well, right? I don't know, this a little bit of the woo-woo stuff, but, there is a part where, if you open yourself up and allow the universe to connect you to different people and not judge what's happening, you're right. You will meet the right people, and those people will, kind of guide you potentially in the right direction without judging them.
I think there is something to that. Sometimes I'll just be in a room in a group of people, and some of them might be familiar, or I should say they are familiar to me, and not all of them, but some people I might have seen a few times. But then there'll still be someone specifically that I know that'll be like highlighted to me.
Right.
for lack of a better way of saying it. So sometimes there just kind of is that synergy or synchronicity between you and another person. You're maybe just going through some of the same things. This is really the same way how friends are often attracted, right? If you win a friend with complaining and they complain about something too, that's pretty much what you win them to. Now they're the friend that complains to you.
That's the winner, right?
Yeah, and that's something to be watchful for to an extent, because what you win them with is often what you win them to. But hopefully they have the maturity to see that like the friendship can definitely grow beyond that. Like, yes, you may have complained about the weather that day to each other, but hopefully you have the foresight to see, well, there could be more common ground to this than just complaining about the weather, and hopefully it's not just based on complaining.
Yeah, hopefully not, right? And I mean, if you built your network based on complaining, unless that's what your group's about, you probably need to get people out of your network, right?
Yeah.
So the next thing I want to kind of mention here was one great way that I was thinking about networking was, just kind of things I've always heard. I mean, webinars have been around for a long time now,
Yeah.
And that's a great way people are using video to kind of connect to people, although they're not in the same city or town, right? So, I mean, with the technology we have nowadays, I mean, I can connect to somebody on the other side of the world, 12, 13 hour time difference, and learn from them, or vice versa, have them learn from me, right? So there's so many things that we can do nowadays with webinars. They're easy to set up. They're very, just, I think, a website, a password, give everybody the password, they log on at the time that you've indicated for them to log on. And now they can also come in and learn from you. But now in this webinar, there's also 10, 20, 30, maybe 100 people who, you don't know, they're also partaking in this, that become part of the network of the person putting on the webinar, right? So, and now that's a great way for the person putting on the webinar to help other people that are joining that webinar become networked as well.
There are certain, if you're using WordPress for your website, for example, there are certain plugins that'll play right into webinars that can really help. And you can also use things like GoToMeeting for that. And so there's a lot of great tools out there as far as putting on a webinar. I would just say one thing to look out for there is I've been to low value webinars. Like, I was hoping to learn something about a particular software. So I jumped on one of the webinars they were having, and it was, 20, 30 minutes. And he just kind of went through step by step how the software works. Well, I wasn't there to learn how the software works. I already knew I had figured that out. It wasn't rocket science for me. Maybe some people in attendance there couldn't figure it out for themselves, so it was helpful to them. But I think by the time he was finished, nobody even had any questions. I don't think that's a good indicator. You want to leave people with some questions, but you want to provide so much value. Don't overwhelm people, but you want to provide them with enough value to where they the relationship is actually building. Now you've added value to them, and then they might want to become a customer, or they might want to connect with you with your emails. If you don't provide that value, then there's no point in connecting again in the future. So low value webinars, probably something to be avoided.
Right. And, I want to give you an example too, to you, David, as well as our listeners, that, when I first got on Twitter, I was listening to podcasts, I actually started following Donald Kelly of the Sales Evangelist, right? So he didn't try to get me in right away. What he did was he actually built a relationship with me, like you said, right? And as that conversation was happening, and I was listening to his podcast, and I still do, and as we would communicate on Twitter, because that's one place that I enjoy communicating with different people, he eventually just came on and asked me, he's like, hey man, I'm putting on a webinar, would you be interested in joining? Didn't force it, didn't really force it on day one. We built that relationship and friendship over a couple of months and whatnot. And he asked me, and the nicest thing was I was able to kind of join the webinar, listen to kind of his technique and his teaching, and really kind of learn a little bit more about sales and kind of what other students that he was teaching in his network were kind of going through, and just learn from their examples as well. Now, the coolest thing was once that webinar was over, he actually kind of hung out with me on the phone, and we kind of chatted after the webinar and really got to know him after that as well, right? Kind of neat thing. He's in Florida. I got some family in southern Florida as well, in Boca Raton, and he's like, when you're down here, come meet with me, right? I'd love to have a lunch with you or a dinner with you and the wife. So we've been able to develop that friendship off of a simple communication and just kind of chatting, and when I do go down to Florida, I'll absolutely go and meet with him and kind of just build that network from that network of friendship.
That's awesome. I really like that, and I think I would encourage anybody to do that, because out of that friendship, I don't want to say special treatment, but you might get a few more gold nuggets thrown at you just for being the kind of person that's actually engaged with them. I mean, I know I would engage with anybody that said, "Hey, a great blog post. Can I ask a question?" Of course, you can ask a question, but just making that extra courtesy to me shows that you're actually engaged and interested in the conversation. Then we can have a real discussion. Whereas somebody that just shares it and says, "Well, I shared your post and I didn't hear anything from you," is maybe has their expectations misplaced a little bit.
Right. And, for me, what I take from it is, if you don't put yourself out there, he could have said, "No, man, I'm not really interested in having dinner. I'm not really interested in meeting you guys," but that's not his brand. That's not who he is as a person. Yeah. He's building himself into a brand, right? So it was really neat for me to know, because our personalities connected, our talking it was easy to talk to him, and he's all, it was interesting actually in during our building of the network, I'd tell him, say, "Hey, you know what, I'm going to use what you said in this podcast, and I'm going to try to do 10 calls by 10 a.m. right? So that's when I was working with the company I was just working with, selling telecommunications, right? And I would just go ahead and tell him right away. It's like, "Hey, man, I got 8 calls, but I had 5 great conversations and 3 no pickups," and whatever that result was, I would tell him right away, right? And in that network, you can also be encouraged when you are talking to the different people as well.
And with that kind of thing, it can also be a timing thing. Like if you had a podcast and you said, "Well, I want Seth Godin on my show," well, you have to ask yourself a couple things. Do you have an audience that Seth has never spoken to before? Do you have a really unique niche audience? Because that's one of the things that Seth is looking for. And B, did Seth recently release a book? And if the answer is no, I'm not sure that he might. I'm not saying he won't. I'm just saying this is how a lot of business owners or entrepreneurs will think, right? Well, is it worth my time, or is the timing right for me to be on this show right now? It has to be oftentimes a strategic decision for them. So they're not necessarily being rude automatically, but they are saying my priorities aren't there right now, but come back to me at this time and we can figure it out. That's usually what their no means.
Well, I think you're right. And in networking, it is all about timing, and it's all about networking yourself at the right time, right? So I can go out and put myself out there randomly, right? And it may not get me the results I want. So, if Seth Godin is putting out a book and then going out on tour and talking to different podcasters and different multimedia facets, then why not, right? But if he's not putting out anything, then there's no real value potentially to talk to different groups, because he may not be adding any additional value which he hasn't already on different podcasts or different platforms, right? But if he's coming out and he's willing to engage with different audiences, then absolutely, right? But it's also part of his plan, I'm assuming, to engage with people at certain times to develop his network and grow his business brand as well.
Another aspect to timing is just reading the room. Having some awareness about what's happening. So if the format of the meeting is where the facilitator goes up on stage and speaks for 30 minutes, probably the wrong time to go around introducing yourself is while they're speaking, because they want to make sure that they're being heard and respected, and maybe they're setting important ground rules for the entire networking event or meeting that you're at. So yeah, definitely picking the right times. Maybe if it's a properly organized networking event, then they might even tell you when that's supposed to happen. In some networking events, it just happens automatically, and somehow you'll just have to find yourself, find a way to connect with the people that are there, or try to identify somebody that you can relate to, and even just shake hands with one person. That's better than nothing. And I'd say, you mentioned earlier about goals. Well, setting goals as far as how many people do you want to talk to. You have to set goals. When it comes to people, though, you always have to set goals, not based on numbers or what your expectations are, so much as, because you can't really control the results, but you have to set the goals based on what you can control, the factors that you are able to manipulate.
Right. And just based on what you just said, right, the things that you can control are smiling.
Yes.
Shaking somebody's hand. and introducing yourself, and then letting that conversation go where it may, right? I mean, we can't control how the other person will react to us smiling, shaking their hand, and introducing ourselves. But if that person is open to wanting to connect, then they will connect, and then that's an easy thing to do, right? I've heard another quote earlier too. It's like half the world is waiting for the other half the world just to put their hand out and smile and shake their hand.
Pretty much,
right? So something along that line, but that's so true, right? Because we're all so afraid sometimes to just put ourselves out there. We may miss opportunities to connect to people that can make huge differences. If we're looking at business, that to our business, or if we're looking at personal life, there's a lot of people out there that can make big differences to both sides, right?
Yeah. And one final thing I wanted to say about networking is that it can happen within the context of community. We had a conversation about community. I would say there too, there is a little bit of protocol. Like you might not want to get into an entire sales speech immediately after meeting them at a community, like a meetup group or whatever. Like that's maybe not the point of the meetup group. You might want to check with the facilitator or the organizer as well, whether or not they're comfortable with you doing that. But you can shake hands, you can say hello, you can trade business cards, and then you can also meet the person outside of that, which honestly is probably the best way. Like just having one exposure and selling on the spot can be very tough, whereas having two exposures or just going out for coffee for a conversation and then building that relationship over multiple exposures, not just one or two, can really build that friendship, and that friendship could be you could take that in different directions depending on what your objective is.
Right. I'm not sure what point we're on anymore. I've kind of lost track.
I think it's probably your last one.
Is it? Okay, yeah, because this has been a great conversation, right? So I can't keep track of what point we're on anymore. But one of the things that I was thinking about is, as we're recording this, and I know you write quite a bit and you blog, and I've done a little bit of writing. I've written on your website prior as well, just to kind of get an idea of what the feeling is like, what it's like. But in order to have yourself a good network of people following what you do on a daily basis, is really putting out content that people want to engage with, right? I think that's important. That's one thing you've learned yourself is, if you put out content that's and again, I know we've had this conversation too, it's kind of odd, you told me this from day one. Sometimes you'll put out the best research, the most exciting piece of literature that you put out for people to read on your blog, and you might get like 100 likes or 100 reads, and you might put out a half-ass job, but you end up getting 1,000 reads, and it's just like, you'll never know what people are really looking for, but really, if you can kind of find out what your audience is looking for, you can then start tailoring those articles and blogs and these podcasts right to those people, right? And the only way of doing that is asking your network of people who want to follow you, what are they looking for out of your content?
That can be an elusive thing for sure. I mean, so often the advice is define your niche market, study your niche market, use the terms that they use the language that they use to connect with them, mirror back to them their problem better than they even understand it. I agree with all those points. I just think there's might also be industries where that's not totally applicable or not possible. For example, the music industry is a very interesting one. I can find stats on certain things, but there are so many things that are shrouded in mystery as far as the music industry goes. It's not a very transparent industry. Meanwhile, if I looked up content marketing stats, like how many blog posts do you think I'll find on Google? There's going to be like hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of results, something like that.
Absolutely. Right? And the same articles are at the top as well, based on their SEO as well.
And I guess you could argue that you could have 200 or 1,000 conversations with who you think your target market is. Then you could really delve deep and formulate thoughts on how to communicate with them. So, I could see that as well. And that might be one way to build a network, is in an industry where there's no stats, there's no indicator of what the problem is, or you've validated the market but you're still not sure how to appeal to them. You could then have these 100 or 200 or 300 Skype conversations and build your network that way. That could be an amazing way to talk directly to the people you think will be your customer. So
No, I agree. And one of the things that I like what you said was really putting out content. And, I get the idea of having a niche market and putting out content for that niche market. But when I look at putting out content, in this podcast, or if we're blogging or whatever we're doing, even if it's just on our social media, putting out content or putting out tweets and putting out, just pictures on Instagram or whatever it is, it's not, my goal is not just to talk to my niche market. My goal is to also talk to people who are not part of my niche market. Because how else do you develop a following or build your network if you don't look outside of what people are comfortable with, right? It's kind of what I was saying before. If you're good on the technical side and I'm not the best on the technical side, now if I was the best on technical side and you're the best on the technical side, one of us is not needed, right? we both know how to do the same job, so we found skills that are exactly the opposite, and we're able to make this podcast work because we are two completely different people bringing two completely different, just sets of information to what we do. But if we don't look outside of our own sphere of influence as well, then we may not be able to, grow outside of our own niche as well.
And there's also people like Dan Norris that said instead of going super niche, they decided to go very general, and that they found the success that way. So it's surprising sometimes what works, and that things we sort of come to accept as like common sense or good advice isn't always common sense or good advice. It as a general rule, it maybe works across most businesses or most network building activities, but it doesn't necessarily work for every business, every industry, every niche. So I could see that side too, is sometimes being more general will pull more people in, and pulling more people in can sometimes mean tailoring to an audience you never thought you would. I think my blog post on the power of your subconscious mind is the perfect example. I'm not even thinking that necessarily musicians are reading that, but it's one of the most popular posts on the Music Entrepreneur website. I think it's probably book lovers or personal development people, or people that are interested in learning more about the subconscious mind that are coming, not necessarily artists, creatives, or musicians. So I'm not naive in thinking that.
Fair. One of the things I want to ask you is I want to challenge you with a question. I know you don't know this question, so I'm going to do it anyways. I like kind of doing this on the spot sometimes and using your expertise, right? I think our listeners will definitely be able to, grow their understanding. And I want to ask you, when you're putting together content, what is your kind of formula so you can engage with the people that one, that are going to read what you've written, two, and how you're getting new readers to come read your content on the website?
Well, I think first of all, it's a matter of ongoing testing. What gets response? If you publish 200, 300, 400, 500 posts, you will have some that are going to get you 50% of your results or 80% of your results. It's not always exactly an 80-20 split, but it often is pretty close to that. So through ongoing testing, what sort of things are you ranking in Google for? And that's actually a good indicator of what people are wanting from you and looking for from you. Not just that Google likes the content, but like people are actually clicking on it, actually engaging it, actually reading it. That's what makes it rank. So that kind of testing is pretty hardcore, I have to admit, without doing any homework. That's one of the things. I think it's important to think about, I think even Pat Flynn said this, think about the transformation you want the audience to go through by the end of the blog post. So what are they going to get? If we think about that up front, it'll really frame the content for you. You'll start the blog post with an introduction, laying out what they're going to learn. Then you teach them what you're going to learn. And then your closing is just all the more compelling, because now they're like, now I've taken you through these steps, and if they've been actionable, then the audience has been able to go through that transformation. So I think that's a key point too. And whether it's like income reports or career updates, the things that I continue and keep publishing month to month, there's probably a good reason why I keep publishing month to month, is because they work. Right. Same with weekly digests. It's just, all it is a summary post of everything that was published new that week on the website, and I throw in a few other extras and goodies, and those get engaged all the time. Why would I not do what works?
Right, exactly. And, and that's what the network that you're building is maybe even looking for, right? I mean, but the nice thing is you're also potentially getting people who don't have all the time to read in-depth blog posts all the time or listen to, podcasts, you're getting the people who want to communicate with you the way they find the best, right? So yeah, if they
100%.
if they can communicate with you on a weekly basis, read your weekly or read your monthly digest, then they're going to do just that, right? And that's just the way they want to absorb your information. But and if they're happy to come every single day, and I know you'd be happy to have them come every single day, and if that's the way they communicate with you, that's wonderful as well, right? But even in that, there's always when you're building your network and really reaching out to your network and having them engage with you, is having them engage with you, is getting them to tell you about what they think your podcast or blog is like, telling you where they find constructively where you can improve, because there's a lot of negative that we will hear. Oh, you could do this, you can do that better. Oh man, you guys, you're not clean, your audio is not the best, or whatever, right? And those aren't really constructive criticisms. If you can find a way for me to get better, or maybe I can talk to somebody to get better, absolutely, right? And that's adding value to both of us, as well as adding value to the listener or the consumer of that content as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like good or great or perfection looks different to different people. It's exactly what the point you made about the weekly digest. That's how some people want to interact or engage with my content, and I'm happy to provide them with that. A simple 300-word, 200-word post that just simply summarizes the new things, and maybe they'll never go any deeper than that, and that's totally okay, because for those people, the snackable content, the little things are great. But for other people who want to come every day, I mean, I don't publish every day. I publish 3 times a week generally, but that's what I think that's what you need to do, is to just keep constantly creating more things for people to engage and interact with. And you're right, it's great to have feedback, but just getting it from one person can be bad actually, and counterproductive, because they may not give you the best. Like, you really want to try to take a bigger sample. Taking it from the vocal minority is also not great at times, because we know the kind of posts people put on YouTube and Reddit. Sorry guys, I think you're being a little too critical at times. Don't want to call you out, but some of the comments are so bad, awful, terrible stuff. And so you're exactly right. When it comes to asking questions, when it comes to feedback, we really have to wade through the bad and identify the good, the stuff that's constructive and helpful.
Well, I think you said it, and this is just kind of a quick example too, right? You go to a restaurant, you have a bad experience, you tell everybody. You go to a restaurant, you have a good experience, you tell a couple people, right? And the bad definitely does overweigh, unfortunately, in our society, right, the experiences we have, right? So, I mean, having constructive criticism is great, and that's the way we can build our network, right? And if we have constantly negative feedback, it's just like in buying, it's like in sales, right? No different. If the people that you're selling to can't trust you, they won't allow you to connect to their network either, right? It's that trust level. It's, if I've had a bad experience, I'm not going to tell somebody I love and trust to do business with somebody that gave me a bad experience, right? So, I mean, there is a way, that we have to do these things.
Telling the truth is hard.
Yeah.
Like when people ask, what do you think? I'm now trying to give them the truth without being like disrespectful or being insulting. And I think that balance is very difficult, because honestly, there's going to be very few things that I think are extraordinary or great. And I think anybody with standards that has been at their craft for a while is going to feel that way. Like maybe something like painting. I don't know as much about painting as music. I do know some about painting, but like I might just go, that's amazing. That's a great painting. I love it. And they're going to ask me like, well, what do you like about it? And I'm like, I don't know. I won't be able to provide them with like an eloquent answer. But music is a whole other thing where like, unless it's extraordinary and I'm like your fan, there's probably something that to me does not appeal. Doesn't mean that it doesn't appeal to other people, but for me, it might not be the best thing in the world. So finding that balance of giving an honest comment that's not insulting and doesn't put them down and isn't disrespectful, but it still conveys the point. And I think it's the same way you have to communicate with employees too. You can't just butter them up. You did a great job, and they made like 13 errors on it. You're like, well, how's that going to help them, right? You got to point out their errors and say, thanks. Here's some of the things that we need to work on to make this better for next time.
I like what you said, because one of the things that came to mind was, the benefit of building a network and engaging with your network is the people in your network can really help you grow, right? And
Absolutely.
and one of the things I really like is the idea that if, let's say, for example, I put out some content and you're the person who's coming to me, David, and saying, you know what, I really like this, but I think you could have probably changed that. Mm-hmm. Now, the nice thing is if you come to me with positive criticism, not only are you helping me, but you're also helping that community that we're developing, that, in this example, right? So if I'm developing a community that's, in podcasts or blogs or whatnot, that person who helps me with their criticism, positive criticism, it helps me embetter their life as well, all the other people in the community, right? And now that's not being selfish. If you start thinking about good comments that help other people, right? I know a lot of times it's easy to say, oh man, you did a bad job, go get a life, but who did that really help, right? It made the person who wrote it feel great about themselves. Great, I'll clap for you. But really, you're doing nothing to really help move society forward or your own personal mental state forward.
Well, and this is another thing, like on Instagram, it's a strategy. Guys, I know exactly what you're doing. Just stop. They'll say great, or they'll leave a happy face, or they'll say nice, which might not like even come close to describing what the photo is, and all you're looking for is that click on your profile image. Just stop. Yeah. I'm not gonna follow you. I'm not gonna click on you. Leave a real human comment, and then we can connect and we can create a relationship and we can go from there. But just leaving something like that is cheap, and I might even delete it. So
I've seen Amazing. You haven't seen that one?
Oh, yeah, that one too.
Great picture. It's like, wait, I'm not taking a picture of anything cool.
Yeah, same idea. I just think that kind of stuff is so poor. People are still doing the same thing on Twitter where they follow, unfollow, follow, unfollow, follow, unfollow. Yeah, that's a great way to build a following, guys. And I'm being sarcastic if you hadn't noticed.
Awesome. Great talk, David. Yeah. I think for number 10, what are your kind of final thoughts on that?
Final thoughts on networking. It's not easy. It's, but I think, again, what I said earlier about letting people surprise you, that's exactly what's happened with my life. And I think that's as a result of planting seeds that are good, like maintaining a good friendship and relationship. And no, I might not engage those people every single day. I might not talk to them every single day. And that's not what networking is about, because you could really burn yourself out and burn others out on that constant ongoing communication. It's really just like making friends. That's all it really is. You're going out there, you're making friends. Just think of it that way. There's so many people that need friends. There's not enough people wanting to make friends. And I think that needs to change.
I love it. My final thought on networking is keeping it simple, right? I think a lot of people might go to different events and really start making it, a challenge to talk to people. It's really not. If you allow yourself just to, like I said earlier, put your hand out, smile, and introduce yourself. That's really as easy as it can be, or as hard as it can be. It really depends on your mindset when you're doing those simple actions, right? And you, like you said, I like the idea of being friends, because you're not necessarily on the first time meeting someone trying to do your 30-second elevator pitch and trying to sell them something, right? No. The whole idea of a network is to really build that friendship, build that following, build that communication and camaraderie. Can't even say the word.
Camaraderie.
Yes, that word right there, with people, and do it together, right? And once you're able to network with that person, and they're trusting you, and they see the value in you, they'll want to move forward, and so will you.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for listening. We'd love to hear your comments. Feel free to leave it wherever it is you happen to be listening. You should be able to leave a comment, or, it's on a weird site. Maybe not. Anyway, you've been listening to Using Your Power on Building a Network. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to sharing again next time.
Thank you.